Today on the Hookup, we're going to take a look at the SwitchBot curtain and the Semi-Smart curtain driver. Two products that I predicted would be massive failures, and I'm going to show you just how incredibly wrong I was about both of them. Back in July 2019, SwitchBot, a company known for their little button-pushing robots, launched an Indiegogo campaign for a new type of curtain motor, and it raised over $1 million via crowdfunding. Having tried and failed to DIY a similar product just a few months earlier, I was really skeptical that SwitchBot would be able to deliver, and more than a little irritated that they chose to use the wildly unreliable Indiegogo to raise money for their launch. A little over a year later, and I'm still not thrilled about the concept of established companies using crowdfunding websites that offer no guarantee of delivery, but I was way off in terms of functionality. Not only does the SwitchBot curtain work, but it spawns some copycat devices that also work surprisingly well. In this video, we're going to put the $89 SwitchBot up against the $51 Semi-Smart curtain driver in categories like versatility, ease of installation, setup process, strength, speed, noise, battery life, control, integrations, and accessories. And then I'm going to give you my final verdict. Full disclosure, both of these products were provided to me by their manufacturers for a review, but I don't do sponsored products reviews, so I have no obligation to say anything positive about either of them. This video is sponsored by Akupa's 10,000 milliamp hour electric hand warmers and battery banks. I live in Florida mostly because I hate the cold. So last Thanksgiving when I visited New York in the winter, these electric hand warmers were a lifesaver. Not only do they provide up to 15 hours of continuous heating, but their new PD version supports charging devices via USB-C quick charge, and you can recharge the bank itself in just 3.5 hours via a quick charge enabled wall plug. Check out the Akupa electric hand warmer and battery bank using the link in the description to support this channel. First, let's talk value. The SwitchBot curtain sells for $89 and the Semi-Smart driver costs just $51. Neither of them can currently be ordered on Amazon, but hopefully that's going to change soon. The Semi-Smart definitely doesn't feel like as premium of a product out of the box, because the plastic shells are thin and they don't line up exactly. And inside there are some notable differences as well. First, the SwitchBot has a single internal 18650 lithium battery that's not easily user replaceable compared to the external dual 14500 lithium batteries in the Semi-Smart. The Semi-Smart also has its batteries in series, meaning the motor has double the voltage available to it, which is going to be noticeable in some of my tests later on. The Semi-Smart drive mechanism is pretty standard. It's a small DC motor and a gearbox with two Hall effect sensors to keep track of the distance that the motor has moved. And while the drive mechanism on the SwitchBot looks like it has some serious R&D put into it, at its core, it's still a DC motor with two Hall effect sensors. Also notable is the fact that the Semi-Smart motor has an internal spring mechanism to put some tension on the roller wheel, while the SwitchBot is rigidly mounted and relies only on the external mechanism to provide tension. Other than the slightly thicker and more premium feeling plastic, there's not a whole lot of difference in the cost of materials in these two motors. So I'm going to give the initial value point to the Semi-Smart, which costs around 40% less. Next, let's talk versatility. The physical characteristics of your curtain robot will vary based on your curtain type. The SwitchBot needs to be ordered in a specific type, either rod, U-rail, or I-rail variety, while the Semi-Smart curtains come with 3 adapters to fit the 3 different rod types. When I disassembled the SwitchBot unit, it's pretty obvious that there's a central module that's the same for all the versions, and then the side rails just get swapped out. But as of right now, I don't see the ability to purchase just the side rails without the motor if you decide to change your curtains in the future. In this video, I only tested the rod style for both of them, and the SwitchBot system was much better, allowing it to fit the curtains with rod diameters from around 0.6 inches to 1.8 inches versus the Semi-Smart that only works from a minimum of 0.85 inches to a maximum of 1.25 inches. I've also read that the SwitchBot is better for traversing expandable curtain rods that have a bump in them, but I wasn't able to complete that test since my middle rod was too thin for either of the motors to travel along. It's nice that the Semi-Smart comes with 3 included adapters, but I think I still have to give this point to SwitchBot for supporting a much larger variety of rod diameters. When you go to install these things, the SwitchBot process is really well thought out and should result in you getting the perfect amount of tension on your spring rails every time. But you probably aren't going to figure it out without reading the instructions. Basically, you flip up the little legs on the back of the case and then place the top slider over the rail and clamp it down by pushing up on the legs from the back until the clips automatically flip up. Again, I think this is an elegant solution to make sure you don't over-tighten or under-tighten the SwitchBot, which would negatively affect its performance. So kudos to the SwitchBot engineers for including this. The Semi-Smart isn't as refined, but it's so simple that you aren't going to need to read the instructions. You just pick out the right adapters, install them on your curtain rod, and then slide them into the slots on the side of the curtain driver. Just like the SwitchBot, the adapters are spring-loaded, but since they don't have a ratcheting system like the SwitchBot does, the Semi-Smart driver is significantly less adjustable. Still, for me with my curtain rod made from 1-inch EMT conduit, they worked perfectly and immediately without any modification. After completing my testing, there is no question that the design of the SwitchBot is better, and even though both of them work, I'm going to give the ease of installation point to the SwitchBot for removing all user error from the equation as much as possible. Once your motors are installed, you're going to need to get them set up in their respective apps and set up their limits. The SwitchBot app is super easy to use and it guides you through the process with thorough and clear on-screen instructions. Start to finish, it took me less than 5 minutes to get my SwitchBot curtain installed and configured. The Semi-Smart motor, which uses the Tuya app, is a bit more fiddly, but it ultimately delivers the same functionality. If you just want to use the RF remote, the setup couldn't be any easier. You just put the batteries in the motor, which automatically puts it into pairing mode, and then you press any button on the remote to pair it. Next, you press the ZZZ button, which is actually the programming button, and then using the remote, you move the curtain to the fully open or fully closed position and press pause. Then using the other directional arrow on the remote, you move the curtain to the opposite position and press pause again. And now your motor knows its positions for fully open and fully closed. To pair the Wi-Fi bridge, first download the Tuya app on your phone and create an account. Then select Add Device and choose Curtain under Small Appliances. Next is the tricky part. Your phone has to be connected to a 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi network. If your Wi-Fi networks are separated into 2.4 and 5 GHz SSIDs, then this is going to be really easy. But if you have a single SSID for both radio types, the inclusion process is going to fail every time since your phone is going to default to the 5 GHz network. For me, to fix this issue, I temporarily disable the 5 GHz network on my SSID while I'm adding new products. But I can't tell you how to specifically do that on your system, so you might need to do some testing. Once the bridge is added, you'll remove the battery in your motor to put it back into pairing mode, and then press the open button on the app to pair the remote. And yes, it is possible to pair both the handheld remote and the app at the same time. To set up the limits in the app, you're going to click the More icon and then select Logic Curtain Distance. Then, using the Open command, you should move your curtain until it's fully open and then press the Pause button. Then move it to its fully closed position using the Close button and press the Pause button again to load in those stop points. In addition to fully open and fully closed, the app also supports any percentage value in the middle. As far as functionality within their apps, I would say that both the Semi-Smart and the SwitchBot are pretty equal, but the SwitchBot has a much smoother and more well thought out setup process that doesn't require you to mess with your Wi-Fi network. And I think that more people are going to be able to complete it successfully, so I think this needs to be another point for the SwitchBot. At this point, if you've gone through the setup process, you already know if these motors are going to work for your curtains. But if you'd like to know whether or not they're going to work before you buy them, here's an easy test. Grab your curtain at the top by its last loop or grommet, and then attempt to pull them closed. If your curtains bind up to the point where you can't move them any further, then these motors are not going to work for you without any modification of your curtains. In my case, I had already modified my curtains to work with a previous project by using a needle and thread to limit the amount that each pleat could separate. The other possible issue would be if you have really heavy curtains. So to test the strength of each motor, I used bottles of water to add weight to the curtains until the motor failed to correctly go to the fully opened or fully closed position. In my test, the Semi-Smart powered through adding 6 bottles of water, or roughly 6.6 pounds to the end of the curtain, while the SwitchBot was only able to handle 4 bottles or 4.4 pounds. The Semi-Smart also didn't slow down at the larger loads like the SwitchBot did, and it's very likely that this additional torque is a direct result of the increased voltage available from having 2 batteries in series rather than a single battery like in the SwitchBot. So mark the point for the Semi-Smart in overall strength. I would have also expected this increased voltage to lead to an increase in speed, but they're actually pretty similar, and the SwitchBot does end up taking this point, closing in just 22 seconds versus the Semi-Smart's 25 seconds. This probably isn't enough of a difference to justify buying one motor over the other, but we're still going to give credit where credit's due. The SwitchBot also has a quiet mode that slows down the motor to reduce its noise, but it ends up more than doubling the time to close to about 48 seconds. And that brings me to the major downfall of both of these motors in my opinion, which is their noise, especially compared to all-in-one solutions. For reference, here's the sound of my purpose-built motorized bedroom curtains closing. And then here's the SwitchBot. And finally, the ZemiSmart. As I mentioned, the SwitchBot does have the option to use quiet mode, which trades off speed and strength for quieter operation. But for me, this lower power modes sometimes fail to close the curtains all the way. So I'm not sure if the decrease in noise is worth the lack of consistency in operation. Either way, in the noise category, the SwitchBot is quieter in both its performance mode and its quiet mode. So another point for the SwitchBot. Next, let's talk about batteries. As I mentioned before, the SwitchBot has a single built-in 18650 battery that gets charged via the USB-C port on the back, while the ZemiSmart uses rechargeable lithium-ion 14500 batteries that are charged via micro USB. The great part about the ZemiSmart is that it'd be much easier for a user to replace these batteries if they ever needed to be. Because the ZemiSmart uses two batteries in series, increasing the voltage supplied to a DC motor will increase its torque. But it also means that the motor is going to be less energy efficient. So, to test their capacities, I set up an automation to open and close the curtains every 2.5 minutes, and I recorded them to see when they would finally run out of battery. In my test, the ZemiSmart opened and closed continually for a little over 40 hours before the curtains stopped closing to 100%. This represents an impressive 480 plus open-close cycles before there was a noticeable decrease in performance. What about the SwitchBot? Well, after the same 40 hours, the SwitchBot app still reported 53% battery, and the stupid thing took a total of 4 whole days of continuous opening and closing before finally failing to close the curtains. 4 days! Let's just take a quick second and recognize my family for putting up with the curtains opening and closing every 2.5 minutes for 6 days straight. The SwitchBot easily takes this category with well over 1,000 open-close cycles on a single charge of a single 18650 battery. Wow. Also, because there's no power-hungry Wi-Fi chip in these devices, there should also be very little day-to-day standby battery drain. So even with fairly heavy usage, I can't imagine needing to recharge either motor more than once a year, which is great. So if there's no Wi-Fi chip, how do you control these things? Out of the box, the SwitchBot curtain is controlled via Bluetooth by directly connecting to it with your phone, and then using the SwitchBot app, you can set up schedules that are stored directly on the device. But other than that, the control is somewhat limited. To enable cloud services, you're going to need a SwitchBot hub, and to control it with a physical remote, you're going to need the SwitchBot button. This means to get the full range of connectivity, you're going to need to spend $147. By contrast, the ZemiSmart driver uses RF433 for control, and in the box you get the RF remote and a Wi-Fi to RF bridge that uses the Tuya Smart Life app for cloud connectivity. The only downside is that RF is a one-way protocol, so there's no easy way for it to report things like curtain position or battery percentage like you get with the SwitchBot's Bluetooth protocol. But there's no question that the ZemiSmart delivers more value when it comes to connectivity, so mark up another point in this category for the ZemiSmart. Once you've got the SwitchBot and the ZemiSmart motors connected to the cloud, you can use their cloud connectivity to enable other integrations. Both curtains can connect to Amazon Echo, Google Home, and IFT, though in both cases the IFT integration is bad and inconsistent, and you probably shouldn't rely on it. But what's new with IFT? The SwitchBot uses their own app and skills for these integrations, while the ZemiSmart uses the Tuya Smart Life app and skills. The SwitchBot is compatible with SmartThings once you connect it to a SwitchBot hub, but unfortunately, even though some Tuya devices are controllable via SmartThings, I can't tell why some devices show the SmartThings compatibility while others don't. And unfortunately, the ZemiSmart curtain driver is one of the ones that doesn't have a SmartThings icon, and it won't show up in your SmartThings integration. If you're like me and you prefer completely local integrations, the SwitchBot devices have been able to connect directly to Home Assistant via Bluetooth in the past, but no such control exists for the SwitchBot curtain yet. And honestly, I don't know enough about hacking and decoding the Bluetooth protocol to say whether or not it's going to be possible in the future. As for the ZemiSmart, unfortunately, the Tuya RF to Wi-Fi bridge won't be able to support Tasmota since it uses the new WR1 chip instead of an ESP8266. But the good news is that the ZemiSmart motor is easily controlled by a Sonoff RF bridge with Tasmota by just capturing the codes from the included remote. The integration section is a bit of a tie for me. Neither of them are perfect, but I'd say if you're a Home Assistant user, you're going to have an easier time adding the ZemiSmart controller to your smart home, and if you use SmartThings, you're going to want to go with the SwitchBot curtain and hub combo. The last thing to talk about are the extra features and accessories that are available for these devices. Both the SemiSmart and the SwitchBot have light sensors built in that can theoretically be used to control the motor. For the SemiSmart, your only option is to set up the night sleep mode in the Tuya app, which I think is supposed to automatically close the curtains at night when the light levels are low. But I actually never got it to work, so maybe it's a planned future feature. In the SwitchBot app, you can set up different actions for different light levels. So you could close them if it's really bright or really dark, but open them if it's moderately bright. In my opinion, this is a much better implementation of light sensing, but it's still semi-limited in its usefulness in my opinion. As for accessories, I mentioned earlier that the SemiSmart motor comes with a Wi-Fi bridge and remote in the box, while those are optional accessories for the SwitchBot. The SwitchBot does have one accessory that might set it apart though. For $25, you can add a solar panel to keep your SwitchBot curtain charged as long as your window receives some direct sunlight. Unfortunately, when my curtains are open, they don't get any sunlight, so the solar panel really isn't effective for me, but I can definitely see its use case since even a small amount of available sunlight will likely be able to keep the motor charged indefinitely based on its super low power consumption. Other than the accessories in the box, there aren't any compatible add-ons for the SemiSmart motor, so the SwitchBot definitely takes this last category. So look, based strictly on the points, the SwitchBot is a much better device, but they both work surprisingly well. When I started these tests, I was fully expecting the Tuya motor to be significantly inferior to the SwitchBot. But as far as performance goes, the Tuya motor actually performs really similar for a third of the price if you're planning on buying both the SwitchBot hub and remote. The SwitchBot does look, feel, and sound like a more premium product, which it is. And if you need SmartThings integration, it is the obvious choice. If you already use SwitchBots in your house and already have a SwitchBot hub, I think it's probably worth the extra $30 difference in price. But if you just need a single motor and you want the ability to integrate it with Google Home or Amazon Echo right out of the box, the SemiSmart provides an undeniable value. I know this video was long, but if you're looking for a way to automate your existing curtains without adding a pull cord or replacing the existing rod, both of these products get my full stamp of approval. Like I said, I was kind of expecting both of them to suck, but it turns out I was wrong and they're actually both really good. If you end up getting one, let me know how it works for you and your curtains down in the comments. Thank you to all of my awesome patrons over at Patreon for your continued support of my channel. If you're interested in supporting my channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.